Scientists study sleep for decades and still cannot explain why we dream. Ancient traditions have mapped the territories of consciousness that modern research is only beginning to discover. Between these two approaches lies a fascinating possibility that could change how you understand the nature of awareness itself. Stay with us as we explore this intersection between modern science and ancient wisdom. If you enjoy investigations that challenge conventional thinking about consciousness, subscribe to join our collective journey of discovery. Today, we are going to explore a framework that bridges this gap between scientific observation and ancient knowledge. We are not asking you to believe anything, but rather to consider how different ways of understanding consciousness might reveal aspects of your experience. Conventional approaches often overlook these aspects of your experience that we are about to discuss. Welcome to One Paradox Collective, where we examine the spaces between established viewpoints. We aim to discover new ways of understanding consciousness and reality. If you are curious about exploring these territories where science meets ancient wisdom, subscribe to join our ongoing investigation. Here's the paradox that changed everything for me. Science tells us dreams are just the brain processing information during sleep. Spiritual traditions tell us dreams are glimpses into other realms. Both might be wrong. Both might be right. The question itself reveals the limitation of our thinking. Let me tell you about the astral plane. Not as some mystical concept to believe in, but as a framework for understanding consciousness. The astral plane bridges ancient wisdom and modern quantum physics. It is described as a dimension of pure emotion and desire. In this dimension, thought becomes reality, and time replaces space as the fundamental organizing principle. Think about your last vivid dream. Remember how emotions felt more intense and how impossible things seemed perfectly normal. You could be in multiple places simultaneously. That was not your brain malfunctioning, but your consciousness operating in its natural state. The physical world is actually the limitation, not the expansion. Every night when you sleep, something extraordinary happens. Your consciousness detaches from the dense physical body and begins operating in what ancient traditions call the astral body. This is not metaphysical speculation. This is a framework for understanding why dreams feel so real. Emotions in dreams are often more powerful than waking emotions, and why some people can consciously navigate these experiences. But here's where it gets paradoxical. The astral plane is not somewhere else. It is right here, right now. It interpenetrates the physical world and exists at a different vibrational frequency. Like radio stations sharing the same space but broadcasting on different wavelengths, your emotions, desires, and fears are not just psychological states. They are actual forms existing in astral dimensions. This creates a profound question. If your emotional states are creating forms in invisible dimensions, consider the kind of world you are building. With your daily thoughts and feelings, your consciousness is constantly sculpting reality in ways you never imagined. The ancient framework describes 7 levels within the astral plane, each corresponding to different types of emotional and mental states. The lower levels house dense emotions like fear, anger, and material desires, while the higher levels contain experiences of love and wisdom. Transcendent understanding is not a hierarchy of judgment, but a map of consciousness exploring its own infinite nature. Here is where modern physics becomes mystical. Quantum mechanics tells us that consciousness affects reality at the fundamental level. The observer effect demonstrates that the act of observation changes what is observed in profound ways. What if the astral plane is where this consciousness-reality interaction becomes visible? What if dreams are quantum experiments? In alternate reality creation, let me pose the real paradox. If dreams are journeys into astral dimensions, and astral dimensions interpenetrate physical reality, then what we call waking life might be just another type of dream, a collective dream, a consensus reality created by billions of consciousness operating together in the densest astral frequencies. This raises uncomfortable questions. How real is your physical body? How solid is the matter you think surrounds you? How separate are you from other beings if consciousness is operating in shared dimensional spaces every night? Traditional spiritual teachings suggest that death is simply a permanent transition into astral consciousness. Instead of returning to the physical body each morning, consciousness remains in astral dimensions to process experiences. Death becomes not an ending, but a graduation into fuller dimensional awareness. What if preparing for death is really about learning to navigate consciousness skillfully? What if the quality of your dreams reflects your readiness for post-physical existence? What if every night you are practicing for the greatest adventure of your existence? But here's the twist that breaks all spiritual frameworks. What if there is no death? What if there is no birth? What if consciousness is simply shifting attention between different dimensional frequencies? What we call in death are just focal points in an infinite field of awareness. This leads to practical questions that matter right now. How do you navigate daily life knowing that your emotional states are creating actual forms? How do you prepare your consciousness for post-physical existence? How do you balance engagement with physical reality while recognizing its dreamlike nature? Some practical explorations emerge. From this framework, pay attention to your dreams with new curiosity. Notice the emotional qualities more than the storylines. Practice conscious breathing as you fall asleep, maintaining awareness during transitions. Develop emotional intelligence not just for social reasons, but as dimensional navigation training. But the deepest paradox remains. If astral dimensions are more fundamental than physical reality, why are we here? What is consciousness exploring through the apparent limitation of material existence? Perhaps the answer is in the question itself. Perhaps consciousness creates physical reality as a training ground for learning. Perhaps we are here to discover that we are not here. Perhaps the journey into matter teaches us about the nature of pure spirit. What if your spiritual evolution is not about escaping physical reality, but about recognizing that physical reality was never what you thought it was? What if enlightenment is simply waking up to the fact that you have always been dreaming and choosing to dream more consciously? So here is my challenge to you. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, maintain a thread of awareness. Notice the transition. Pay attention to the shift from physical to astral consciousness, not to prove anything, but to explore the mystery of your own infinite nature. What if the most profound spiritual practice is simply being curious about consciousness itself? What if the astral plane is not a destination, but a description of where you already are? What if reality is far stranger and more wonderful than any spiritual teaching or scientific theory has ever suggested? Join us next week as we explore the next paradox in this series. How do thoughts create living beings in invisible dimensions? Why might your emotions from childhood still be influencing your adult life in ways you never imagined? And how does quantum physics reveal something about the nature of consciousness that ancient wisdom has been teaching for millennia? Remember, at One Paradox Collective, we do not promise answers. We promise better questions. We do not promise enlightenment. We promise the courage to remain curious about the infinite mystery of existence itself. Your dreams might be more real than your waking life, but your waking life might be more dreamlike than your dreams. Welcome to the paradox. Welcome to reality.